If you are in sales, something that you are going to hear over and over again throughout your sales career or sales journey is objections. There's hardly going to be instances where you are going to make a presentation or give a pitch and you are not going to be hit with an objection. So many times you are going to be facing objections, and it doesn't even matter whether it's a real objection or not a real objection. One of the things you need to do is not just accept the objection. You need to try and actually overcome it. Don't just accept it, be like, okay, and then move on to your next lead or your next prospect. You need to try and overcome that objection. And the reason you need to try and overcome it is that sometimes in sales, people are just trying to brush you off quickly. And so they give you a response. Often they might even be automatic responses. And those responses are in the forms of objections. Don't always just accept what they say. Sometimes they are giving you responses that might even just be automatic. And that's happening because often in sales, we are disrupting them through their workday. And they're just trying to get on with things, and they give us the first objection that becomes automatic to them. What you need to do is try and overcome that objection. Try and see if it is a real objection, or even if they do have objections, to try and see if there is still a way of moving forward with the sale. One of the methods that you can use to overcome objections, and I'm saying one of the methods because there are probably so many out there, but this is one of the methods that I use, and I found it to be extremely simple to implement, and it's quite effective as well. It's quite an easy one to try and learn. It's going to be something that you can implement straight away. And the method I'm talking about is the ARC method. And there might be different names by which this method is known as. And as I said, there might be many other methods. This is the one I use. It's the ARC method, ARC method. And each of those letters in the word ARC stands for something. So the first is A for acknowledge. The R is for reframe, and then the C is for close. That's the three simple steps to this method, and each one plays quite an important role. So the first step, or the first word in the process, acknowledge, is that when you do receive an objection from somebody, firstly try and acknowledge it. This is going to make them feel as if they have been heard or understood, or that you are at least listening to them and not just trying to sell. So in the acknowledgement phase, you would be using words like, I understand, or I see where you are coming from. This is something to also try and just break their defense, because all of a sudden they now think you might actually be on their side. Then when you look at the reframe section, that is where you're now trying to change their belief in a way. And you're not doing this in a way that's like challenging or threatening to them, but you are trying to make them look at the objection or look at what you are selling in a bit of a different way. So an example of a reframe would be something like, oh, a lot of our clients felt that way at first, but when you look at the cost in the long term, it actually works out much cheaper than what it might sound like listening to the initial costs. So what you're doing is you're trying to change their thought process. One that often works, or one that I often use in my sales presentations, because I sell training to companies, is that a lot of companies hit me with the objection saying, we're already working with a training provider. And what I'll tell them is, I understand, and what we are trying to do is not necessarily even replace your current training provider. We sometimes have identified gaps that your training providers might not be filling, and all we're looking to do is fill those gaps. So as you can see in that example, you're trying to get them to see that you understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, you're trying to get them to look at things differently. And then the third step in the process, close, that would be where you now ask them a question or you make a suggestion. So a question would, for example, be, looking at the long-term costs, it could work out cheaper for you. Would it be okay if we do a calculation just to compare the difference? There, as you can see, you're now asking them a question which is linked to the reframe that you just did, where you spoke about the cost that might be different or the cost that might be less over the long term. So try and keep everything relevant. Obviously, when you are acknowledging and you reframing and closing, it's all following the same topic or the same theme of what the objection was. And that's simply how this method works. When you get an objection, what you're going to first do is acknowledge the objection. Then you're going to try and reframe. And finally, still try and close. This is to try and help you move forward in that sales process. Now, it doesn't mean that you're automatically now going to get the sale. What might happen is that you actually get more objections. And again, you can use this exact same method to try and overcome those objections. It could now be that you might even uncover legit objections, which would follow an automatic objection that they might have just given you in the beginning. So try and overcome the objections that you get. Obviously, not every company is going to buy from you even after you've dealt with objections. But the idea is not to just accept the objection and move on. Try and challenge it, try reframe it, try and see if you uncover further objections and deal with them as well. Now, how do you go about preparing this method? What I did, I simply took the 5 most common objections that I get from the companies that I speak to. I made a note of those 5 different objections, and I applied each of those questions or each of those steps to those 5 different objections. So I took the first objection, for example, where they tell me we are already working with a training company. I then use an acknowledgement phrase. I then do a reframe as well as a close. And I put that down all on a piece of paper, all 5 of the objections with all these steps for each objection. And I kept it next to me. Sometimes I still keep it next to me. While I'm on a call, if somebody hits me with an objection, it's easy for me also to just look at it. There's structure when you follow this process, and it just helps you to sound more prepared when you're making your presentations. So what I would suggest, make a note of your 3 or 5 most common objections that you receive. Apply these 3 steps. So do the acknowledgement step, reframe, and close for each of those objections. Try and study them, try and learn them, but if you're in a position like where you're making cold calls, for example, keep them next to you, at least until you've learned how to do this whole method automatically, and try overcome objections. Move towards that sale, because you shouldn't just accept the first objection you receive. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a comment, feel free to like the video, and keep an eye out on my channel for more videos that are going to be like this. Until next time, keep well.